life that got you twisted. Things getting sideways. It's time to unfuck it. The Unfuck It Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unfuck It Podcast, where we talk about things that are fucked in the world of work and try to figure out what we are going to do about it. Hopefully other smart people come and join us and they have ideas, because we oftentimes find ourselves fresh out. So for today, we have one of those other smart people with us. We have Heather Waite, who is here to talk about employer branding and all the things that are great about it, and all the, well, at least the one or two things.
Lots of things
that are kind of fun. So Heather, would you like to, well, before I introduce you, I don't want to leave off my co-host Crystal, because as my legal owner and full-time spouse, I am obligated to make sure that she is happy at all times, and that I do everything I'm supposed to do. So Crystal, how are you?
I am wanting you to stop saying that you are my legal property. That is what I am wanting today. Can we make that happen?
Okay, as my legal property, that's a fair request. Can I do it that way?
No,
okay.
definitely
So,
doesn't work.
Here we are, partners. So our next episode will be what is fucked about our podcast. Anyway, Heather, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Really excited to join both of you.
Of course.
And I don't view anybody as anybody's legal property, so I think we're good here.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody who's listening? Tell them who you are, what you do, and what you love.
Yeah, absolutely. So Heather Waite, I live and work out of Atlanta, Georgia. So Southern Peach all the way. And I am an employer brand and talent experience manager. I work for a very large healthcare company. And I own all things from employee value proposition structure down to our brand ambassador program and all the fun things that sit in between. And so it's really been an interesting journey. I come from a corporate communications, public relations background, and really sort of fell in love with the reputation management piece. And then that evolved into employer brand. Saw the call to join the podcast and was like, I got some topics we can talk about, and let's unfuck ourselves. So glad to be here.
But wait, I thought everything in the world of EB was wonderful. There are problems. There's things that have to be unfucked.
I mean,
I can't wait. Tell me more.
Most of the time it's sunshine and unicorn rainbow farts, but sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle. And, one of the things that I think can oftentimes get really be fucked is that people view you in this role as an order taker and not a strategic consultant. And that can be difficult. It can really hinder progress and to be successful and to be able to move your employer brand forward, right? Because at the end of the day, your employer brand is hinged on a great reputation and driving the business forward. And if you aren't seen as somebody who can consult on both of those things, you're not going to be successful in your role.
So I would agree with that. I would go so far as to say is I don't know that originates with TA though. I think with EB though. I think you actually have to step back into TA and HR, and how is that viewed within the business, right? And if TA and HR is not strategic and EB is born of TA and HR, then chances are it's not going to be viewed as strategic either, because they're not seeing how that connects into revenue, and that's a pretty broad problem I think in our industry. Connecting what we do back to revenue directly or indirectly. But the bottom line of all of the things that we do is in service of driving business revenue. So I think step one is, where did EB originate, and how connected is it into the revenue value stream?
Absolutely. And I will say I have been at an organization where EB is an integral part, right, of the TA organization is seen as a strategic partner. And I've been at an organization where it was an afterthought, right? Hey, let's go get that great place to work badge, or let's gussy up our career site a little bit, versus being somewhere where you have a seat at the table and you're talking about employer brand. What does that mean in terms of the talent experience? Not only getting people to consider you, but then once they're here, staying here, right? What does that look like? And I totally agree with you. If you can't tie that to those largest business goals of, we need qualified people, we need them to stay here, because then they're going to be exceptional in the care they provide to our patients. If that is not valued and seen right away, you are going to be climbing a major hill.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, like, So you used a phrase. You used a phrase that we're going to hot button for a second. Not directed at you. I hate the phrase seat at the table. Like so much. Because I think it sort of sets this unrealistic expectation with a lot of people that there is actually a seat they've got to be invited to. There's a table they've got to be invited to in order to be able to really drive value. And maybe it's just my personality. It is probably to some degree my personality, but like I've never been invited to a table and I've never waited for it. Right. So like if I was brought into a business, I was brought into a business to be able to accomplish something and whatever that is, in whatever role that is. Right. I don't even know that that's even specific to TA or EB, but you're brought in to accomplish something. And if you wait for permission or an invitation to do that, like you're never getting anywhere. So because we're all kind of caught up in our own stuff. Right. And so I'm going somewhere with this. It's going to be a really tenuous thread that may have to be edited. We'll see. But
I'm pulling on the threads. I'm getting there with you.
Thank you. But like, I mean, we really are, we're brought in to do these things. And if we wait for someone to give us permission, well, they're brought in to do things too. And they're focused on their things and you're trying to get your things done. And sometimes those things don't necessarily align the way that we want them to when we want them to. Right. So I do think that one of the issues that by and large we have is we wait for this imaginary seat at this imaginary table to be able to make an impact and then get frustrated when no one actually gives us the ability to do that. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're 100% right too. And it's probably my personality as well. Like I don't necessarily ever wait for the seat at the imaginary table. I think that's totally understandable. I will say though, and this probably goes into, I'm so sorry. This goes into a larger topic of, making sure at the onset that you're building those meaningful relationships and laying that groundwork for trust. Right. With your stakeholders, with your partners. And I realize sometimes you can't go, bursting through the door or the window like the Kool-Aid man.
Oh, yeah. I love him.
But, you have to build that trust and whether it is a seat at the table, whether it's not, it's at least being a part of the conversation. Right.
Sure.
And making sure that people understand your mission ahead. And also too, one thing that I have found that I've been successful with the employer brand strategy is I really tie it back to those individual work streams of like, how am I going to make your job easier? How am I going to make your work more efficient? And that if nothing else, that tends to work and be able to sort of be the bridge or the hand holder, if you will.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think the other thing that we tend to like, if we don't want to be order takers, tying the work that we do to strategic outcomes and goals of the business is probably something that needs to be on every EBRM professional's list, right? And again, any professional's list. How do you tie what you're doing back to value, right? And so we do a decent job, I think, overall of aligning things to talent goals. But talent goals should be, the goals cascade down, right? Talent goals should be aligned to other things as well so that we're, again, driving that back into moving the business forward. And I don't think that we do an adequate job of that as a profession, right? Like when I talk to a lot of people who work in EB and RM, and it's very rare, which makes me a little sad, but it's still a pretty young function, right? Like overall, it's still young compared. But it's very rare to hear those EB goals connected to anything beyond hiring, right? Even into the whole life cycle. People who work in EB tend to get it. Like, employer brand is bigger than just the high to hired, right? It's everything that comes after too. But they haven't quite learned how to translate that into that full experience in the overarching industry, right? It's still pretty much the minority that do that.
And this is where, and I think, and I've seen you at a few conferences talk about this or in discussions of that, but that's where you have to view employer brand not as just this function of why is it great to work here, but as a function of defining the culture of the organization and the workplace. And that's the mentality that I always bring into any of my employer brand work is this really telling the story of what it's like to be here? Not necessarily to work here, right? But to be here, to be a part of this organization, right? And I think a really good example of a campaign that I saw on Kudos, I don't know the person who led this campaign, was a few years ago, GM had a really great campaign. And the focus of the campaign was not, here's what you're doing in your 9 to 5, but here's what our team does in their 5 to 9, right? Or outside. Like, what does that look like? And defining them as an individual and then tying that back to the organization. And, it really got me thinking like, okay, yeah, it's not about here's why you want to work here. It's about here's what working here empowers you to do outside of work.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's it's kind of akin to some of what I've talked about with HR, that like the whole job of HR is to get people to stop thinking about things that aren't related to their work during the day. Right? It's like, that's it. Because if I'm worried about benefits, I'm not doing where I add value to the company. Right? So it's like getting the focus where it needs to be, which sometimes doesn't sound like an awesome approach. Like it sounds a little, I'll say self-serving, but in a lot of ways, like it's supposed to be a little self-serving. Like you kind of have to be protective of those things to be productive, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. And, one of the things too, going back to the larger point of being that consultant and that partner, right, is I always say when I'm sitting there in discussions with, what are we going to do? This is we need to solve for, we need to hire, 1,000 therapists by the end of the year, whatever, maybe. And I say, let's take a step back. Why are we putting ourselves in a position where we have to hire these numbers, right? What is going on to where our retention is not where it needs to be, right? Where our organizational operations aren't where they need to be, that like we're constantly having to fight fires instead of I always joke, call it the Smokey the Bear approach, right? We want to educate people, right? So they know how to prevent the fires, not actively have to be in them, be like, oh shit, the forest is coming down. So that's always what do you want to get out of this? What is your goal here? What is the long-term vision here? Okay, so we're going to fill this headcount. Sure. But like we do that. And then what? Are we going to be right back having this discussion a year from now because we didn't really look into what we need to do to get these folks to stay here as well?
Yeah. There's so much of like with everything we do, EB or not, there's so much of the necessity of just asking why. Mm-hmm. And people are hesitant to do it because we're supposed to know the answer why, right? That's part of our job is to know the answer, right? And I've made this joke a lot. That's my only marketable skill is the willingness to ask dumb questions and sit quietly until somebody answers them. But it's amazing how much you can learn by just saying like, yeah, why do we do that? I think have you ever heard the story about Zig Ziglar's mom and the ham?
No.
So if you get into Zig Ziglar stuff at all, almost anybody who's listened to him has heard this story, but he talked about when he was growing up, every Christmas they would do a ham, and his mom, when she made it, she would get the ham and she would cut off the end of the bone end before she made it. And at one point he asked her, like, why do you do that? Like, what does that do? And she's like, well, it's just how I learned to do it from your grandmother. Like I grew up watching this, what she did. So I just use her recipe. So at some point he went back to his grandmother and said, why do you cut the end off of the ham before you cook it? And she goes, oh, because my pan's never big enough for the ham. So I have to cut some of it off so it'll fit. But if we don't ask those questions and we don't have like, why are you cutting it? Like you never find those things out. So that's, I think, just a marketable skill in and of itself to be able to say, I don't know why we do that, but I would love to find out.
And something that, always served me well in former life when I was doing corporate communications and interacting with our executives, and they would say, oh, we need to put out a press release about this, or we need to do X, Y, Z. And I would say, well, tell me more about that, right? Tell me more about that. And that's always my go-to in the employer brand space. Like, tell me more about that. What are you trying to accomplish? Why have you done it this way? Why are you resistant to doing it another way, right? And what I have often found too, and whether it's dealing with a recruiter who's got a huge, productivity goal, or it's a senior vice president, and in between, what they want is to know how you're going to make their job easier for them. Yeah. And they want to feel like you're listening to them. Like, okay, yeah, they have this idea. Okay, maybe we can't do that, but, right? And that is always effective. Tell me more about that. Tell me what you want to change. Help me to understand. Break it to me like I'm 5. All of those things.
So how do you do that? Like, how do you start building trust, especially if you've got someone who's, they're new to EB or new to a specific, role or to a specific company or whatever. If you're a person coming in and you recognize, okay, there's a lot happening here that is order taking, that I am just being asked to go and find me 1,000 therapists or whatever. How do you do that? Like, what's your approach to starting to build the trust up to where you're allowed to ask some of those harder questions?
Well, I think it goes back to what Chris and I were saying earlier, right? It's like you have to position yourself as an expert. You do have to position yourself as somebody who, understands the business, all of those things, but you have to do the groundwork, right? Like when I come into a new role, I always call it the discovery process. It's like I'm listening to folks. I'm getting all those meetings in my calendar that I can. I want to not just only learn like what are our business goals, but I want to learn like what are the processes and why are you doing it that way? Why are you using this tech stack, right? Like, what is that tool? Like, why did you go with that tool? And then once I sort of learn more about that, then I slowly but surely try and weave in, well, hey, like, have you ever considered this? Because I think if I understood what you were saying, this is what you're trying to accomplish. If we do a pivot, can we do an A/B test? Can we do a pilot, right? And so you slowly get in and build that trust. It's also, too, you have to have the business acumen, too. If you don't understand your business, your industry, what your organization does, it can't speak intelligently to that. Your partners, and again, it doesn't matter if it's the sourcer who's trying to find the talent or it's your senior vice president, they're going to tune you out in a heartbeat.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I find that interesting considering, the same thing is true in kind of all aspects of HR and recruiting, but I find it interesting the number of people who have ended up in that space by accident. And I always thought, like, why on earth would you put someone into a TA role that doesn't have that background? Like I've worked in healthcare and I dealt exactly with that. But in those situations, like the people that were in those recruiter spots were like former nurses, like people who had done the job. So they actually brought something to the TA role because of their background. It's not always the case, but it's interesting having that functional knowledge and experience. Like in theory, makes you a little more credible when you're talking about the kind of talent you're after, right?
Absolutely. And I will say too, like for example, I work with someone now who was an occupational therapist before she decided to pivot and focus on her family, and then came back for a role. And she is one of the most talented people overall that I've ever worked with, but an amazing recruiter because she understands the business. And she's a great partner too for our employer brand, because I'm like, tell me, what is it like to be an OT here, right? What does that actually look like? What is unique about what we do versus the thousands of other places where you can go and be an OT? And so, yeah, absolutely having those diverse backgrounds and diverse thinking, right, on the team as well is so critical. But to the larger theme of building trust, right? It's that you value those perspectives and you lean on those folks who can offer that, right? Seek them out. I bird dog them. They're always the first people I look for anywhere I go, always.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've often found like the most vocal people, especially the ones who are not on board with your plan, like those are the most vocal people. Like you go after them because they'll become your biggest champions if you can get them on board.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are really valuable people to get to know. Yeah.
Yeah, the enemy to work bestie pipeline is short, I have found. if you can build that trust and they can see you as a strategic partner, absolutely. Has happened many times. Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be folks that don't. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just like, to that end, like y'all were talking about functional experience, and I didn't want to interrupt that flow because it was awesome. But I don't even know that you have to have that experience to provide that value, right? Like knowing the function is great. And if you have experience in it, then yeah, it's definitely a bonus moment. But there's so many different ways to learn it. And so like one of the things we have a client right now that they're struggling with that very thing, right? Like how do we build that credibility really with our business partners, because we don't do what they do. And so they tell us like, oh, we need this, that, and the other. And then all we have is to to go on is what the marketplace tells us about that, right? Like what candidates tell us, what other employees tell us, like what we can hear in the market space, because we don't actually do that work. It sort of puts us at a disadvantage. Like it doesn't though. It's just different, right? Like it's not an advantage or a disadvantage. Like you have an advantage, they don't, right? When we're inside of an organization, we get really myopic into that organization, right? It's the depth versus breadth of experience. So from a work stream standpoint, like there's nobody who's going to know more than they know about the kind of work that they do, except for all the other people outside of their organization that do it. And you talk to way more of people than they do. So in actuality, like you have a different value than they do. So your value is bringing them that breadth that they don't get because they're within the organization. So, you just kind of have to retool, I think. So we talk about what's fucked at work, right? Like not understanding the value, I think, is really part of that what's fucked piece, right? Like we let people tell our stories for us.
And two, I think you can always see, right, the companies that value and understand employer brand, like you can spot them out in the wild in a heartbeat, right? And there's so many out there. I could give a list of accolades too, but it's so easy to tell, right? You can spot it a mile away. And then but what I always tell folks too, right, is like why it's so important, why a strong employer brand is so important. And again, going back to that culture piece, is I can always spot a really shitty employer brand a mile away as well, right? Like I can always, it takes me all of 2 seconds on whatever I may be to determine that, right? And also too, it's like that perception of, I can always tell, right? Is this a check the box function of this organization? Or is this really where your leaders are bought in? And to your earlier point about it's not just thinking of the hiring needs, it's a larger people experience and larger organizational experience. So I would say there's a lot of value in employer brand, and when it is not valued by all the people in the organization, it's so easy to tell, and you're going to lose the candidates you need always.
That's such a great point. You will. I think you also lose a little bit of your soul, right? Like,
oh yeah.
When you go to work every day, and I've been thinking about this, like a friend of ours recently came to a mutual agreement that like their role was not the right role for them in this organization, right? Which happens. Like we've all been in those roles too, where maybe at one point it was great and everything was sunshine and roses and lollipops, but then it's not, right? Like something happens and it's just no longer the fit that it was, which sucks, but happens. So what do you do? How do you deal with it? All of the things, right? And one of the things that like I wish I had said to them months ago was really just like, hey, you've grown out of this role and they've grown out of you, right? Like, and not necessarily grown up and grown better, but it's just shifted and y'all don't mesh anymore. And the way that they looked at your experience at one point in your council, right, is different than what it used to be. And instead of continuing to bang your head against the wall, maybe you need to step back and go, do they value me? Do they value not me as a person, right? But me for what I do for this organization? Do they value my function within the organization? Or is this a check the box measure? Because if you're a check the box measure, your life is just too short. Like we spend 2/3 of our waking day at work, and your life is just too short to do that, really. So I think for whatever it's worth, as we talk about things that need unfucked, I think we need to look at this idea of staying with organizations and being loyal to organizations that really don't care about us the way that we care about them.
Yeah, such a great point, and such a great point, or great points, and so a lot to unpack there. And I will say too, right, like I always used to tell my teams, right, that like I always want to look at my life as a pie chart, right? And I don't want work to be the largest piece of the pie. I just don't. And I love what I do. Do not get me wrong. I love the employer brand space. I love my colleagues. I love the people that I get to meet in this particular line of work. But, you know, it's not, I don't want it to be the biggest piece of my pie. And, you know, and listen, but there are some folks who do, right? And so, for employer brand, and hear me where I'm going with this, right? It's like, that's where you have to really know, like, okay, maybe the organizational culture is we are grinders and like, you know, unlimited PTO, but good luck using it. And there are going to be people that are okay with that, right? That they're like, put me in, coach. Then you may have an organizational culture where it's like, listen, you send me an email at noon the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, it's going in the fuck it bucket and we'll revisit that in a couple weeks, you know?
There are no employer branding emergencies. That's a Brian changing line. I don't fully agree with that. There's a couple employer branding emergencies, but by and large, I think that's really true. Right? Like a lot of what we think is an emergency at work, Europeans are great at showing us are not actually emergencies at all.
Oh, yeah. There's very few organizations where I can say this is actually an emergency. But I think you just, you know, and that's goes back to that piece of like, you have to really understand employer brand is not just, hey, we're hiring and we're awesome. We give you 2 more holidays than our competitor, right? Ain't gonna work. No, it's
no one cares.
Here's right.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think people do care. I've seen people, especially in healthcare, that leave and change jobs for a quarter an hour. The problem is they will leave you for a quarter an hour or 2 extra holidays. And so that's like, some people care, but that's not the group that you're really
right.
After, right?
Exactly. And that's and it's in healthcare, it's in any industry, right? The person you want, right? It's a 2-way street. It's a mutually symbiotic relationship, right? You want the good folks working for you and they want to work for the good folks, right? And hey, that's okay. If, again, going back to, you know, just the differences in culture and approach, if somebody is motivated by an extra paid holiday, and I'm not passing judgment, cool. It may not be a right fit for your organization, but you also, as part of the employer brand leaders, you have to make that easy to understand, right? And whether that's in those initial touch points or that's in those conversations that your recruiters and hiring managers are having, right? Because if they're not on the same sheet of music, you are not going to get unfucked anytime soon.
Right. That's very fair. Yeah. So how do we fix that? More importantly, what has worked? As opposed to all the things that are problems here. Like, what have you seen work as far as like getting out of that mode, of getting to the point where you can actually make some inroads, where you can send the right messaging, where you can get your clients on the right page, where they are pushing the right stuff and they do understand the EB role? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I would love to hear Crystal's perspectives for sure, because, you know, she just has such a wealth of knowledge. And again, I've heard some takeaways from you, but for example, in the employer brand space where I'm at, or in the function that I have, right? One of the things that I always think about is that like my role is really to be sort of like chief storyteller. And I think that, and you know, don't get me in trouble now having people say, she said she was in the C-suite. I didn't say that. I'm just saying, I view myself as chief storyteller, right? I think of how can I convey this in a meaningful way that connects with those audiences and really know my audience, right? And I think that is hands down where a lot of organizations have missed. I have been somewhere before where I said, who are you trying to hire? Well, the person who has this degree or this level of experience. No, that's not what I'm asking. Who are you trying to hire? Tell me what the perfect candidate looks like here, right? And so when you understand that, right, and you can build your toolkit around, I know who my target audience is, then you can begin to tell the stories that matter to them. You can really dial, I always joke and call it what's in it for me radio, WIAFM. You know what's going to appeal to them, right? And I think that's where you can begin to build success. And that's where you can start to see people view you as a, you know, strategic partner, because they understand, you know, your audience, you know the business goals, you really get how you can connect the dots between the organization and the person you're wanting to hire, and how you can, again, dial into the what's in it for me radio. That's what I always have in the back of my mind. How
I like that.
it's, you know what, it's, I don't have it copyrighted, maybe I should, but you're welcome to borrow it.
Somebody, actually, JCK, one of our team, brought up this idea the other day of doing some stuff on Spotify, different ideas. I'm like, well, that's kind of I kind of like putting those two ideas together. Like, I'm going to make you a playlist, the What's in It for You, which I know doesn't work for the radio station thing, right? But you could call it that, the What's in It for Me radio that you send to each can. I can see that.
Okay, I know I was supposed to answer a question, but I think I've lost the thread. What was the question I was supposed to answer?
Oh, what's worked? Like, what has gotten you to the point where you can be consultative, where you can ask those questions and be effective in putting it all together?
Okay. Well, so I kind of go back into my recruiting days, right? Like when I started an executive search. And so I spent the majority of my career working with executives. And what I learned early on is that I don't have to understand everything about what they do, but I have to understand what brings them value. So rather than try to guess, which I think a lot of people try to do to seem insightful or strategic, I just ask. Like, I just ask in the very first conversation we have, like, what is going to bring value in our conversations? Like, what is going to make you want to hear from me? And what is going to make you glad we talked? Right. And so it's the same kind of thing in the work that you do. Right. So when we come in and talk with a client, it's what is going to make EB valuable to you? What is going to make the work that we do like good?
Impactful.
What is going to make you glad that you invested in this? Like, what needle are you trying to move? If you can't answer that, and you have to touch back, right? Because people evolve, so do people programs. So the goal that you had 3 years ago, I guarantee you, is not going to be your C-suite's goal now. Like maybe the overarching, very broad, we want to attract and retain people. Sure. Like, okay, but newsflash, so does everybody. Right? And
Exactly.
worked for the company that was like, please, we would like to shed all of our people and work with donkeys. Like, and small robots. I don't know, maybe small robots, but.
Well, the robot
I was going to say, I think
small robots, but like in general, like we're not looking for small farm animals. Like we're looking for people. And we always have been, and to some degree we always will be. What we work on may shift, but like the robots aren't coming to take our job in the next decade or two, probably. Not all of them. But what we work on is going to shift. So if we're going to invest time and money, if a business is going to invest time and money into a program, they've got goals that they want out of it. And if you don't ask what those are up front, you are missing your boat. That cascades down from the CEO to the, first time manager, every single one of them. What is going to bring you value? What is it that you hope to accomplish? What is going to make you glad that we work together? And tie those back into the overarching business objectives.
Could not agree more. And I will say too, like, it is wild to me how many people in this space are not having like strategic yearly roadmap planning discussions, right? And not just with like, again, the TA team, but with the expanded team to understand what the goals are. And I think a really good example, right, is I worked for an organization that unfortunately they went through a round of pretty significant reductions in force, right? But they still needed and still had these needs of, we have to continue to grow our business. And in order to do that, it's not like we're not going to have hiring needs. They did. And they needed, they couldn't hire engineers fast enough, for example, right? But the employer brand never shifted because there weren't those conversations to keep the employer brand leader and team in the loop of like, hey, listen, our needs have slightly pivoted. Like, here's where we need to shift and dial in. And so externally, it was a mess, right? Because all people knew was, I thought this company just like laid a bunch of people off, but yet I'm getting these targeted ads on LinkedIn that they want to hire me. Like that's quite a disconnect there. So absolutely, like you should be having, and I would even argue like those should be quarterly discussions,
Yeah. And anytime the business shifts like that, I mean, so, again, when we work with clients or we're taking over a program, one of the first thing I do is after finding out what the value is like, okay, like let's talk about when you need to get me on the phone. right? And some of that may be perceived as like, oh, okay, she's setting her consultant boundaries. And it's like, well, no, not really. What I'm doing is making sure that you're aware of these key moments where your EB needs to be in the loop. Just like you, I was like, I am the people version of your PR team, right? So if you were going to call PR about something, you need to call me, because there's a different story that we have to tell on that side of it. So
Absolutely.
did you just become the largest, supplier of whatever it is that you do in your industry, and so you're going to put out a press release? Awesome. You should be calling me on the other side of things, because we need to update all of our things to explain why that matters to someone. Conversely, are you laying off 18,000 people because you've suddenly figured out automation can do this entire row of jobs? Okay, you need to call me, because we have a different type of conversation that we're going to need to have on this end, or you won't be able to hire the other 360,000 people that you need to hire the way that you need to hire and retain them, right? Every business action has an equal and opposite people reaction. And so really, if you were going to call your COO, you should be talking to your CHRO, right? If you're going to call your CMO, or your PR team, you need to be talking to your EB team too. And I stress that really heavily early on, because the people side of business is what powers the money side of business. Those two things are inextricably linked. So if you ignore one or treat it like overhead because you're chasing the dollar, you will never find the dollar.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of organizations that could learn from that for sure. A lot of people leaders that need to hear that message. I would not disagree. And nothing is a worse look, right, than you just had something catastrophic happen, right, at your, whether it's reduction in force, whether it's the CEO passes away or something like that, and then you have a bunch of your company luminaries, for lack of a better way to frame it, on LinkedIn. Sharing some sort of story tied to like their sales acquisitions, and like it's like whoa, and nothing could be a worse indicator of left hand is not talking to right hand, right? And like
last year when the hurricane hit Florida, we had a company that we were working with that we were like, hey, we should probably pause social posting just for a couple days. Like, you don't have to pause everything, but Glassdoor, Blind, any of the third-party review sites, LinkedIn, your socials, and I don't know why I separate LinkedIn because it's totally a social network, but email marketing, we should send out a message and then put a pause on it for just a couple of days. And that message needs to be, we are focusing on our existing teammates. Here is the contact line if you work for us and you are stranded, right? Or someone that works for us and you think they need help. Like, that's it, right? Our thoughts are with everyone, be safe, that kind of thing, right? We don't say anything about business. We don't say anything like, but we just won this award and we want to share it. And I'm like, and you can next week.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone put out an ad that says, we laid off 10,000 people just to make room for you. Like, it's not an effective line to put together.
And so, I mean, it would probably be really heady for the one person, but also, whoa, that guilt.
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And two, like your internal teams, like your talent acquisition team, your recruiters, right? It puts them in such an awkward position as well. When you're not communicating, you're not pushing out those messages, your employees aren't on the same sheet of music because they have candidates that are inquiring. Like, I just saw you let go all these people, or, hey, I just saw like you're closing down your beef factory in Nebraska. Sorry, that's a real example, but your recruiters are like, okay, what do I tell these people, right? And what an awkward position to be in. And if you don't have somebody who, is skilled at going to your communications team, your PR team, your marketing team, and saying like, hey guys, can we get the story here and what we want to say? And, internally and externally, if you don't have somebody who feels empowered to do that, ooh, buddy, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And so if you don't have that, like for anyone listening, if you don't currently have that capital within your organization, first of all, I would say pretend like you do and act like it anyway, right? Because again, no one's going to invite you to have that capital. You have to explain what to do, why to do it, and kind of prove that you got it.
Right.
that they continue to give it to you. But if you're looking to gain that in your organization right now, one thing that I would do is go cozy up to your PR people before there's a problem, right? And explain to them what you do. Because I've found repeatedly PR teams, internal or external, often have no visibility into the HR marketing side of the house, right? They know the marketing team and that's about it. And they may not know everybody in that. So they for sure don't know you and what you do. So letting them know, like, hey, this is what we do. Here is how this impacts the business. When you get a press release or, y'all are told about something, before it publishes, can you make sure we have a memo of it? Like, we're not trying to yuck your yum or change what you're doing or any of that stuff, but we need to kind of craft and maneuver how we're going to position this in TA, how we're going to position this with the employees. And we can't do that if we don't know about it until after the rest of the world does. We need to know before the rest of the world knows. Right. So again, making sure that you're really clear on, we're not trying to change your work stream. We just want to make sure that we're prepared to support whatever it is that you're putting out from a people side. That can be a really good place to start. Right. And then if and when that doesn't happen, because sometimes they're like, yeah, that's great. And then they go about their day because, again, they've got different priorities than you. And they put the next one out. The thing you might want to start doing is building a tracker of here's the number of reactive conversations we had, and here's the missed proactive opportunities that we had. And then at the end of a quarter, look at that. How significant was that? Was it a lot? Was it a little? Did it matter? Did it impact your flow, your pipeline flow? Did it impact any hires? Did you lose people because of something that you were not aware of? And that happens in everyday flow of business. Take that to your marketing team. Take that to your COO. Right? COOs are awesome and underutilized because COOs have the benefit of finance focused and performance focused, right? They kind of do both, but they also care about the people side of the house. Maybe a little differently than the HR people do, maybe less warm and fuzzy sometimes, but they understand the value of them, right? So being able to go to them and say hey, I think there's a gap that we need to close up. Can you help me, right? Can you help me and can you help our team connect the dots between these two functions so that we can be in lockstep in a proactive way? Because had we been in lockstep here, here, and here, this is what would have happened. Right? Now,
I mean, you're speaking to my heart. Again, I come from that PR background, that corporate communications background. And it was funny because, again, that's how I got into this space was, hey, what is the story of our culture? What does that look like? Tell me more about this. And looking at my role at that time as the charge I've been given is we have to establish our reputation. Okay. And I was one of the first questions I asked was, all right, well, what is your reputation with your employees? Right. And what is your reputation externally that people who want to be your employees or maybe don't want to be your employees? Right. And so that was how I got into the space because I got a lot of, I always joke and call it the Furby blink, 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 blink stares. And then, but I ended up having a partner who was yeah, you're right. These are, yeah. And so we had literally in our corporate communications, run a show, our playbook where if we were announcing something, we always shared it with our employees first. If we were hitting a challenge, right? If we had a customer incident, there was a data breach, whatever it may be, right? We had some sort of talk track for our employees, and TA was an integral part of that, right? We would go, or the people team was an integral part of that, and to say, hey, FYI, this is what's going on. You may get questions about it. Here's a drawer statement that you can use. And then if that evolved, if the situation got worse, we kept them in the loop, right? And so I think it's a good CYA for many reasons, but again, at the end of the day, it really does help to establish an authentic employer brand because your teams are again on that same sheet of music. They know what's going on, and that's so critical.
As a former theater kid, I love that you call that running. That. That speaks to me. So, speaking of things that speak to me, as we get ready to wrap up, we like to do a little bit here at the end, talking about your own experiences and how you've changed your approach or what you've done to make yourself better. This is what we call the go unfuck yourself part of the show. So, looking back at your own career and the things we've talked about and building trust and kind of getting out of the order taker mentality, what was your approach to that? What did you do that worked for you? How did you get more effective at that?
So I learned this several years ago and it really resonated with me, but it was like the most successful, effective people, because successful and effective are two different things, but someone who's both of those, right? They're not always available. And what do I mean by that is they're not always available and they're not always accessible, right? They're not going to respond to you 5 minutes after you send the email, right? They're going to be thoughtful and intentional in their response. And so I used to, right, when I was in order taker mode or, proving myself or, I want to be the absolute best and climb this ladder, right? I used to be like, okay, I responded to the SVP in 30 seconds, right? Instead of, let me think through a thoughtful response, right? Let me think through, let me give the others a chance to see and weigh in and then sort of evaluate. And then also too, like, I think what has, again, really helped me is when I'm in meetings and calls, discussions, whatever it may be, I like to be an active listener. Listening is an act of love. It's so important, right? And we know that both in our personal lives and professional lives, right? But I want to be an active listener. And what I mean by that is I listen more than I talk. And that seems so simple, but it really is so critical. And then once I've had a chance to listen, that's when I open the door and I build that trust by asking those questions, right? That Crystal really honed in on a few minutes ago. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the goal here? Tell me more about that. But if I just made myself like, hey, I know the answer 5 minutes in, or hey, I'm going to talk over you every single time, right? It seems so simple, but think about in your working relationships every day. There's a lot of folks that aren't like that. And that's really what has helped me to become a strategic partner and build some of the most pivotal relationships, both in my current role, but also just to be able to network and over the course of my career. So
Take that. Good advice. Good, solid advice. I love it. So thank you so much for being here. For all the people who are watching and are listening, tell them where they find you and how they can.
Oh, I love it. So you can find me on LinkedIn. As Crystal said earlier, it is a social site, but I do love it. I go there for my news. Also on Instagram and Facebook if you want to connect there. And then, of course, if you want to shoot me an email, I can provide that after and would love to connect and hear from anybody. And I hope to be at some fun conferences in 2026 and do some great networking. And I'm sure I'll see Crystal and Dwayne there as well.
What's on your docket conference-wise?
Oh, well, you know what? I have said for the last however many years I'm going to RecFest, so hopefully making that happen. And I would, but pie in the skies, World Employer Branding Day, but we'll see. So I think, where was it this year? Amsterdam? Maybe I'm wrong. It was somewhere big this year.
I think it's Amsterdam every year, actually, yeah.
So
and
that's what I'm hoping for.
TA Week should be on your list. If you have not put it on your list yet, you should. Not just because we want to see you, because we do. But as far as like TA and EB go, well, as far as EB goes, it's probably the most comprehensive conference because it is 3 days. And I think this year is a pre-con and a post-con, where sometimes there's just one or the other. And this year they have both, which is kind of nice. So you have employer brand and recruitment marketing tracks the entire conference from pre-con through post-con. So there's not another event that I'm aware of in the space that offers you that many days of learning opportunities across the industry. So Talent Acquisition Week, so I think it's just taweek.com. GSMI puts it on. I absolutely love it. Don't miss it. Haven't missed it since 2012 or 13, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I hope to see you there then.
You will. Plus, it's San Diego, the happiest place next to Tijuana, I guess.
And San Diego in February is like the best, right? Because you can leave whatever cold place you're in and you are warmer.
I mean, San Diego's the best year round for sure. So, all right. I am sold. All right. Thank you both so much.
All right. No problem. Well, thanks for joining us, Heather. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we'll get to see you out in the world soon.
Have a wonderful holiday. Take care. Bye.
It's time to unfuck it. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Until next time, keep it real and unfuck it.